Hey guys, it's Dasher Zach in seemingly different lighting with the camera tilted up so you can't see the Christmas disaster on the floor. Back with another review, this time of the Rapoo VT2 Max Gen 2. It's another potato. We've almost reached the potato tier list. One more review coming after this. This is my third mouse I'm reviewing from Rapoo. I have like 45 Rapoo mice in my house to be reviewed soon. This is one of the better ones. This is one of the top GPX adjacent mice that I've tested in recent memory. Did I expect that coming in? I'm not entirely sure. Would you expect to see that from Rapoo? Maybe you should, because they're putting out pretty good mice and helping you to answer the question, should this replace your current potato? Do you need a new potato? Is the potato mouse shape the mouse for you? Let's find out. So here we have it, the Rapoo VT2 Max is yet another potato, but this potato is actually one of the better ones. I'll tell you that right off the bat. And if you're wondering, yes, I have my laptop here in the background. I'm literally coding with AI as I review this mouse. The world we live in is crazy. And I've also decided to go purple on purple because screw it. This is the Jinsoku from 10 to X. I'm loving it. Let's talk about the mouse. This is the VT2 Max. A few improvements over the non-max version we'll talk about here in a bit, although it also has ratio opticals for the main clicks. Definitively a choice, although potentially not a bad one in this mouse. As you guys may assume, I'm covering this as part of my build up to my ultimate GPX clone tier list, which has been in the works for far too long and will eventually come. But I've enjoyed reviewing Rapoo's mice so far with the VT7 and a bunch more in the pipeline. Well, let's jump into some specs and pricing. The Max edition comes in here at $56 on sale right now. Side note, they have a crazy thing where if you bundle or buy a bunch of mice, you get a bunch of money off. You can get these mice very cheap. The non-maxes were going for $22 on the Black Friday Cyber Monday sale, and you get the non-max here at $38 base before the sale ends. As you can see, a ton of colors between these two mice, which is also a thing that Rapoo often features on their mice. On the lighter side of a GPX clone, the Max is going to have 120 million. It says Rapoo opticals, they are ratios, and then the sensor is actually, I believe, a 3950 Ultimate or whatever versus the 26K DPI 3398 that comes in the non-max version, and that's about it for the differences. Both have an 800 milliamp hour battery for a ton of battery life on the Nordic 54 series MCU. I think the non-max versions are a great purchase. I think if you want to get a mouse for the long run with the top line sensor, you could go for the 3950 in the Max. It might really just come down to your preference between the ARM 100M mechanicals and the non-max and their implementation of the ratios in the Max, which we'll talk about here now. So the clicks here in the Max, the ratio opticals, a switch that is much maligned by me, and I probably don't need to give much explanation. I will say this is one of the better ratio implementations that I've felt. Not a lot of pre-travel, not a lot of post-travel, not a lot of side-to-side play. They're on the more tactical side. There is still like a base level of maybe slight sponginess, but that's just sort of what the switch is like when you use a ratio optical. I would say they're not quite on like a Razer optical level of ratio implementation, but they're not nearly as bad as I'll say a lot of the switches that came in the pulsar ratios when I used to use those switches, and some other mediocre ratios that I've used in my time. Fun fact, I also have the non-max version here, which has the ARM 100Ms. They're a little less mushy and they're a little lighter to actuate. I don't really have a strong preference because these are two of my least favorite overall switches, but I'll say Rapoo doesn't do a bad job implementing them by any means. The ARM 100Ms rebound a bit more quickly, so they're slightly more spammable, and they're also a little higher pitched and not quite as loud overall. So again, it'll come down to your preference, which of these switches that you want to go with. Coming to the scroll wheel, I do like Rapoo's scroll wheels. The steps here are on the lighter side, but they are defined. The click is extremely spammable. I like a medium light actuation, a very nice scroll wheel click. Huge props to them on that. Side buttons, another big win for this mouse. Very accessible, not quite as far forward as some other GPX clones, a little bit more central, large, glossy. Huge wins across the board here for that. Not a lot of pre-travel, not a lot of post-travel, not a lot of side-to-side play. Honestly, very, very good side buttons. Quite satisfied with them. Quick side note, these two top buttons here are glossy and they are programmable as well, which is awesome. A huge feature that a lot of mice don't have. I don't like DPI buttons here that are only DPI buttons, but if you can reprogram them, that is a cool feature for sure. Coming to the bottom of the mouse, the skates are not restricted, decently rounded, very nice, no complaints at all on the skates. The sensor here is a little bit further back of the GPX, which we'll see in a little bit, but it's not back by any means. It's 65 millimeters from the back to the sensor location, 61 to the front, so it is still front of center, even though it's further back, and I didn't really notice any differences in performance where it was so far back that it bothered me in any way, shape, or form. Also, obviously in use, I've removed this door here for dongle storage as that adds weight, and I just don't need it. One last thing, as you'll notice here, only an on button. This is not tri-mode, it is only 2.4 gigahertz. Coating on these Rapoo Gen 2 mice, very good, nicely rubberized, very grippy, probably about an 8 out of 10, maybe even 8.5, very satisfying in hand. A mouse that I can grip without any grip tape on the back for my crazy tilt grip, and it still feels very good. I'm also currently regretting this purple on purple, but I'm going to stick to it because we've done the video so far. drop the mouse like a boardsy, carry on. Last aspect, build integrity. There is a bit of flex here on the sides. As you can see, a bit of movement with the side buttons there. Nothing you notice in game, but not the absolute most rigid shell on the side. Not really any flex here where the door is at all on the bottom. Nothing on the top, back, nothing on the front. So overall build integrity for me, a strong pass, no issues in game. Not quite that like exoskeleton crazy reinforcement some mice have, but very good. So overall implementation is very strong on the VT2 Max. I think one of the stronger implementations I've seen on the Gen 2 Rapoo mice, with the awesome large glossy side buttons. Good for a Raisha implementation of the main clicks. They're a very strong scroll wheel, and they're also very nice skates. Comparisons, obviously we have to go with the GPX as the main comparison point here, and these are shockingly similar. A few things I have to point out about all GPX clones. Obviously the GPX here has the ridge on the side. The VT2 is one of the mice that does not have any ridge at all there. Overall profile of these mice is literally almost identical. There are ever so slight measurement differences that I will cover in the weights and measurements section. I will say roughly the same length, slightly shorter in height, 0.1 to 0.2 millimeters, so pretty much a spot-on size GPX clone. This seems to be about the best way to show the sensor position differences here. Again, you can see slightly further back here on the VT2, but not by much, and still pretty central on the mouse. The width differences you might see here are just a slight camera distortion. The mouse is roughly the same width as well. I'll be honest, I prefer the VT2 in almost every single way to the GPX. The coating is better. The skates here on the bottom are better. I guess I do prefer GPX main clicks potentially, even with their extra tactility, just because they're not the Raishas, but the Raishas here aren't bad. This is a better scroll wheel. It has extra buttons. It has larger, better, non-mushy side buttons. And this max version is $55 before like a code, which can get you down to like $45. The non-max version can be had anywhere from $23 to $30 depending on sales and codes. This mouse is like $160. You could buy like 5 of these and it's a better mouse. I don't understand why you would ever buy a GPX. Don't be silly. If you're considering a GPX, get one of these other mice that are very similar, but much better. And the VT2 Max is a great option in that regard. It's definitely one of my top 3 GPX adjacent competitor mice. You'll see where it falls in the tier list, but it has a very strong full-on recommendation from me here. And with that, I think it's time to jump into the mouse performance, which the performance on this mouse was pretty good. I didn't find any issues when using it as far as like skipping, obvious wireless interference, anything like that. The sensor felt very performant to me. Pause for a random shout out to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge in Colorado. That place was sick. Give it a look if you have a few minutes. Awesome history there. Anyway, again, performance wise, nothing otherworldly, nothing terrible. Let's show a few results here. This is what I would say your average result was. It was generally pretty decent. There was a congregation around 0.5 milliseconds for my 2K testing, a decent amount of pulls up to about 1 second, and then there would be a cluster randomly for one of the like circular swipes that I do where there'd be more pulls in this 2 to 4 second update, which is a little bit concerning. Then I would go off, and this is a better representation of the average distribution, and then again a slight sort of congregation of pulls above even 3 milliseconds here. This was like your average result. Again, nothing I really felt in use, but it definitely is there. So again, not like a god tier implementation here, but not a bad graph by any means. Relatively average, and nothing that felt negative in game. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it, nor would I really let this stop you from buying the mouse. I believe Pzogle in his reviews of the Gen 2 Rapoo mice found similar. I do know they've done a lot of updates to the dongle and the mouse, so we'll see if potentially a firmware update comes out to button this up and make the implementation of the performance top tier. So as far as my overall thoughts here on the VT2 Max, very impressed. Rapoo has not really let me down yet, and I think this is their most buttoned up best Gen 2 mouse yet. With the Nord 54 series, the 800 milliamp hour battery, which I should have talked about more here, you're going to have almost infinity battery. I did test this on the highest performance settings possible, which is what I always do for all my testing, but you can get hundreds and hundreds of hours of battery life should you want to drop this to maybe 1K, not the remotely useless 20K that I typically do all of my testing on. Mostly impressed by the side buttons here, just very well designed. The, again, decent Raisha opticals, very impressive coating, very usable, enjoyable skates, and a very competitive weight for a clone, along with the amazing price. Full recommendations for me here on the VT2 Max, and I'm going to be honest, it's going to be a full recommendation for me on a majority of their Gen 2 lineup, although there will be nuances and caveats for each mouse as the reviews do come out. And now, as always, shockingly, here's a sound test. So this is once again their WebDriver. They do have a desktop version that is required to update the dongle and the mouse. And yes, I do have them on the latest firmware. Coming in, you would have seen this before in my VT7 review, but you can set your DPI here and go independent XY. Performance-wise, I ran max RF. I ran 8K key scan rate. I believe is only on the max version. I was on 2K polling and the maximum RF. And then there is sensor angle rotation in their software, which is very cool. All of these turned off, no motion sync, etc. 1mm LOD and 0 to bounce, for which I saw no slam click issues whatsoever. We get the completely stock VT2 Max coming in at 57 grams. Actually not as light as advertised, pretty much on par with the other clones. If you pop out the door here on the bottom, they'll drop it to 56, which is a little bit better. Non-max here about the same without the door. Do note this battery though, 800 milliamp hours, you can get close to mid 40s, maybe 47, 48-ish at the worst possible case, modding this battery down to a smaller size, which you would still get great battery life with the 54 series Nordic MCU, and that I think is the peak potential of this mouse. Smaller battery, lighter weight, still great battery life, good performance, good mouse, absolute win. I'm only going to measure this mouse itself in this video. Refer to previous videos for other measurements if you want to compare. Narrowest grip point here, exactly 59 millimeters. Front grip width, roughly 61.3 millimeters, with the back flare peaking at 62.8 millimeters. And I get the max height of the mouse coming in at 39.3 millimeters. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. That about sums up for my thoughts on the Rapoo VT2 Max. I'm in a weird mood. This is a weird outro. It's a very good mouse. I do fully give it my recommendation. Specifically, the value for the price and the performance is kind of off the charts if I'm being honest with you. They got a bunch of great colorways. They got high-end specs, great software, including sensor tilting if you want to do that stuff. Honestly, just good stuff from Rapoo. You guys are killing it. Pretty excited to review the rest of their Gen 2 lineup. I forgot to mention this until now. This was a sign up for review. My thoughts and my opinions, they're all my own. Hope you enjoyed it. Let's call it a review. You can follow me at @Zach. Check out the Mousecast podcast, as well as my peripheral Discord server. And with that, we'll see you.